Okay, so the Constitution is now the law of the land. This contract has been entered into. By definition, a federal system is a system of shared powers. That's a federal system. With the ratification, the agreement of the Constitution, which shares the powers between the central government and the states, you are now in a federal system of government. Chapter 3. You're in a federal system of government. Now, the sharing of powers has really been what we've been, like I said, we fought a war over it. Who's supposed to do what? We've questioned again and again and again what our contractual obligations are from state to state and to the nation as a whole. We've done that throughout our history. Different courts have come up with different ideas as to what this contract does and means. But that's where we are today. The Constitution is a contract between the states. Initially, certainly it is a covenant between the people. It is a document that is a rule book on how to govern, or the parameters of governance. Okay. And when we talk again about building, formulating, adopting, implementing, and evaluating, the evaluation, the formal evaluation, comes back to the courts and in that parameter of the Constitution. That is what courts do. I mean, courts evaluate. That's what we ask them to ultimately do. They referee. The ability of the court to strike down an act of Congress, though, is not readily assumed. I mean, we take it as, we recognize that is the role of the court, to exercise judicial review. But nowhere in the Constitution does it state, does it enumerate, does it expressly delegate a power of judicial review to the court. Individuals would argue, well, that's just what courts do, so it's assumed. It's like, if you're going to have a boat, it's got to float. And that's what boats do. All right? Judge. Okay? So it wouldn't necessarily have to write into the Constitution that judicial review would be a power of the courts. But still, arguably, you don't get that precedent, you don't get that formal recognition that that is the role of the courts until 1803. Here we are, I think we're back into chapter 2. 1803 is Marbury versus Madison. I'll give you the short version. You can go into the text and go online and get the longer version. But the short version of Marbury versus Madison, little interesting thing takes place here. Madison is the Secretary of State of Jefferson. You guys in that review touched on Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Anti-Federalists did not want to enter into the constitutional agreement. People who were against the federal system of government wanted to keep the confederal system, the Confederacy. Maybe strengthen the Articles of Confederation to a degree, but not the system of sharing of powers. Chief among those anti-federalists was Jefferson. Jefferson was an anti-federalist. He was by ideology, we call him an anti-federalist. This is what he believed in terms of the role of government, in the structure of government. He was an anti-federalist. By party, political party, he was a Democrat-Republican. I was waiting. What? What is a Democrat-Republican? Isn't that an oxymoron? Is that what you're saying? Well, the Democrat-Republicans were the Republic as a democracy of the people. The Federalists were individuals who supported the federal system, the federal structure, who wanted the Constitution, who wanted to centralize that power of the states into one entity. And those individuals, those Federalist individuals, included obviously Madison, who authored the Constitution. Madison, who helped to promote the Virginia Plan. Madison, who teamed up with Hamilton and Adams and other Federalists who throughout, from its inception, from the Constitution's ratification, promoted the central government. To a point. As I said, Madison is the Secretary of State of Jefferson. How did that happen? Jefferson's the anti-federalist. Madison's a federalist. By party, by the way, the first of the parties, the Federalist ideology was also the Federalist Party. So those who were anti-Federalists, Democrat Republicans, those who were Federalists were Federalists. Madison becomes Jefferson's Secretary of State. Two modes of thinking. One, he had come to realize that the federal structure, the sharing of power, was maybe not what he intended. And his thoughts had changed on it. That's possible. The other, more cynical version of why Madison became Jefferson's Secretary of State is that it was the Secretary of State which lined themselves up to become the president. And Madison had aspirations of becoming the president. In fact, he does become president after Jefferson. Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. Monroe was the Secretary of State of Madison, so forth down the road. Jefferson, you had Washington certainly, but you had John Adams. Now, Adams and Jefferson did not get along. I think they respected each other, but ideologically, they were at opposite ends. Probably what we see today in the federal government on C-SPAN and Fox, not the you lie stuff, but the stuff where there's respect for the individuals, but there's just strong disagreement. Maybe this is the Al Gore and George Bush of the day, or maybe, the John McCain and Barack Obama of the day. Individuals who may have respected each other, but individuals who certainly disagreed with each other. And Adams and Jefferson could not disagree more over the role of government in the structure. Adams runs against Washington, or his name is put up against Washington to become President of the United States. And in that time, the President of the United States is whoever got the most electoral votes. The Vice President of the United States is whoever got the second most electoral votes. And Adams was Washington's vice president. Jefferson runs against Adams when Washington decides not to run again. And Adams gets more votes than Jefferson does, more electoral votes than Jefferson does. And that makes Adams president and Jefferson vice president. Jefferson declines, basically. And then 4 years later, Jefferson and Adams find themselves running each other again, and this time Jefferson wins this race. Now you have a situation, not unlike a situation where Republicans are in charge and then a Democrat administration comes in, and not to mention a Democrat Congress is in place. Well, here you have a situation where the Federalists are in charge, and now the tide is turning to the Anti-Federalists. And again, Anti-Federalists want state power, keep it local, keep it simple. Jeffersonian democracy is this idea of local governance. Jeffersonian democracy at this time is an idea based on agrarian society of agriculture, that the resources are plentiful, that you have them right there. The need for government, and certainly the need for multiple levels of government, is non-existent, if not at least very minimal. You know, what happens to the role of government? What is the role of government? Allocate scarce resources, decide who gets what, right? Scarce resources. What happens to the role of government, the need for government, if the resources aren't scarce? It goes down. Right. If government goes up, if the resources go up, the amount we have, the need for somebody to regulate those or determine for us, if they're less scarce, it goes down. So Jefferson's point is the resources of this country are plentiful. The need for government should be limited, very limited. Mm-hmm. The mentality of the Federalists is that, well, I'm not thinking just about this country. I'm thinking about the globe, the world. I'm thinking about security and trade. I'm thinking about what is already going on with England. I think the mentality of the Federalists is really what we would look at as a superpower mentality. Becoming a superpower. Taking the resources of the United States and combining those makes us a much more powerful nation on the world stage. Taking the resources, the military might of this country together, pulling it together, makes us more powerful on the world stage than in our own separate capacity of keeping it local. All right, those are the two ideas that are going on. Centralizing the power, keeping the power diffused and out and local, keeping it simple, like KISS method for Jefferson. I mean, one of Jefferson's great quips is, listen, if we get wrapped up in foreign markets, if we get tied to foreign markets, we are going to get tied to foreign conflicts. We're going to get wrapped up in foreign wars.